In the last episode, we saw that Shin and his company decide to visit the Hiruko Shrine to learn more about the festival. Now, we get to learn about a popular island legend, which states that in the 1700s, a whale washed ashore on this island and transformed into the first person who came into contact with it, devouring it soon after. This caused havoc among islanders, who began worshipping it as a goddess, fearing its wrath, believing it to be God's reincarnation. Back at the shrine, Shin is discussing this legend with Karikiri, while Yushio's shadow is observing everything disguised as Shin's watch. Shin implies that it must have been an alien who landed on Earth and eventually drifted ashore on this island as Hiruko, causing the shadow sickness that killed his parents, Yushio, and many others. Karikiri, however, doesn't seem to believe Shin and starts laughing, calling it all his imagination as he advises him to rest well. But when Shin shows him the photos that So's father gave him, Karikiri's face turns pale as Shin reveals that Karikiri is only pretending and actually is aware of the whole truth this entire time because he witnessed it all with his own eyes 300 years ago. Shin further reveals that Haine was the first person to come in contact with the whale, while Karikiri is Haine's guardian shadow, Shide, and the first child she biologically gave birth to. Shin mentions how he and his team have always been suspicious of him. However, after getting the photos, it all becomes clear to them as they find out that Shide is actually a distinct relative of Dr. Hishigata's family, who after Haine became the goddess, got married to her and had a child together. Since the child was a spit image of his father, Shide grew greedy and made Haine transfer his personality and memories to the child in order to restore his youth. Ultimately, Shide continued to do this repeatedly, allowing him to live for centuries. Shin then confronts Karikiri for being a human-shadow hybrid as he aims his gun at him, threatening him to answer all his questions. But instead of cooperating, Karikiri begins to irritate Shin, which eventually ticks Yushio's shadow off, causing her to lash out at him, killing him in one strike. Yushio's shadow is pleased to finally put Shide's story to an end. However, Shin appears to be concerned about the fact that Karikiri's hand is not as it is supposed to be. Shin is occupied with his thoughts when suddenly a clone Karikiri with a bandaged hand sneaks behind Yushio's shadow and strikes at her, stabbing her shadow, causing her to scream out in pain. Shin, horrified, attempts to shoot at the perpetrator, but Karikiri transforms into Shide and stabs Shin with his blade, knocking him out of the room, while Shin, with the spear pierced right through his body, teleports back in time, landing in the forest where he and Yushio's shadow saved the kids from Buchi's shadow. However, this time, Yushio's shadow isn't present with Shin as he is left all alone, sobbing in despair with a bleeding right eye. Now, Shin is sitting by the forest all numb and in shock when suddenly a crow approaches him as it rejoices at the death of Yushio's shadow, glad to have finally gotten rid of that annoying girl. He is taken aback to discover that the crow is none other than Haine. Suddenly, he realizes that he is approaching the loop limit, and that if he dies now, he will be gone forever. Shin's face turns pale as he learns that Haine has been waiting for this moment and has been observing him in crow form all this time. Haine then copies the little girl among the children that Shin saved, as she summons an army of stray shadows to get rid of them. Shin is terrified to have him and the kids surrounded by numerous shadows. He is fully aware that he will not be able to kill even a single shadow on his own, but after witnessing children's bravery in standing up against the foreign creatures, he becomes determined to protect them with his life. He then unconsciously puts his hand inside his pants pocket, only to feel something beneath its surface as Haine attacks them with her shadow army. The strays are about to devour Shin and the children when something clicks in Haine's mind as she calls them back and leaves, cursing the situation. Shin, perplexed by Haine's behavior, takes the material out of his pocket, only to discover Yushio's shell locket. Afterwards, Shin decides to call his teammates to alert them of the crisis, but is unable to do so due to the poor network in the forest area. However, the team, on the other hand, receives a call from Shin informing them that Yushio's shadow has died and that they should gather at an isolated Torajima island nearby to plan ahead. The scene then shifts to Haine and Shide, as it is revealed that Haine has copied Shin and his phone, which she is now using to deceive Shin's teammates. Meanwhile, Shin arrives at his house to meet Mio, her shadow, and So, who are supposed to be on guard there, only to find Mio's shadow injured and trapped in the corner of the room, while So and Mio are nowhere to be found. He releases her as she tells them that Mio and So received a call from Shin, stating that Yushio's shadow is dead, and thus they trapped her, believing that she soon would break free from Yushio's shadow's control, and turn against them as they leave to meet Shin. Shin's heart stops as he realizes that it wasn't him, but his shadow who tricked his friends. But he is unable to understand how it all happened, to which Mio's shadow explains that though it doesn't happen in this timeline, Haine did manage to copy him and his phone in the previous loops, which she now carried along with her in this timeline. They are in the middle of the discussion when Shin receives a call from Nagumo's phone. He eagerly picks it up, but is shocked to hear his own voice on the other end. Realizing that it's Haine, Shin becomes desperate as he questions her about what she did with his friends, to which she responds that he must find out for himself. She further informs him that while Nagumo and her team are on Torajima Island, Mio and So, on the other hand, are in Alan's garden. Thus, now it's up to Shin to decide whom he wants to save as she disconnects the call, leaving Shin distressed. The scene then takes us 10 minutes back, where we find Mio and So getting cornered by Karikiri at Alan's garden on one hand, while Nagumo and her team on the other hand appear to be suspicious of Shin's call, and thus plan to send Nagumo to the island while others remain on standby outside. Reaching the island, Nagumo's suspicions are proven right as she finds Haine in Shin's form waiting for her with Karikiri. Karikiri blames Nagumo for Haine losing her powers as he allows the dead shadow to engulf him, transforming himself into Shide, while Nagumo too lets Ryonosuke take over her body, instructing him to use all of his strength and not hold back as the ultimate fight begins. Then Ryonosuke and Nagumo work together to fight Shide and even attempt to attack Haine, but all their efforts turn futile. Seeing Nagumo trying so hard to defeat her, Haine eventually asks Nagumo why she came back, fully aware that only death awaits her on this island. She also questions the cause of her desperation, which is driving her to endanger her own life for the sake of strangers. Nagumo suddenly becomes nostalgic as she responds to her questions, confessing that she is doing everything to redeem herself from the guilt of getting her brother killed 14 years back. She is well aware that it was entirely her fault. As a result, she no longer wishes to repeat her mistake and aims to save the lives of those who are yet to be lost. Nagumo then tries to buy more time to get some help as she starts questioning Shide's true intentions, claiming that he has a goal much different from Haine's. But before she can continue, Shide cuts her off as he strikes at her with his spear. However, Ryonosuke cum Nagumo is prepared for the blow as Nagumo transfers Ryonosuke's data into Shide, causing him to rip apart his shadow armor and take Ryonosuke's true shadow form himself. Just then, Tokiko comes for their aid as she lashes out her giant baby shadows at Shide. Shin, on the other hand, arrives at Alan's garden with Mio's shadow to save Mio and So, only to be met by Karikiri, who informs them that they are too late because Mio and So have already been sent to Hiruko Cave and are about to become Mother's food. This enrages both Shin and Mio's shadow, who eventually kills Karikiri on the spot with a slash of her knife. However, she suddenly gets a vision as she confirms to Shin that Karikiri was telling the truth and Mio and So did actually die as her shadow body felt the death of the host. Mio's shadow further tries to look into the memory of the dead Karikiri, but finds nothing. Just then, she senses some shadows close by as she rushes to the nearby manhole only to find it all bloody. They move further and are astonished to find Tokiko and her baby shadows gravely injured by the side of the road. Tokiko tells Shin about her ordeal as she asks him to go to Torajima Island to save Nagumo, who is fighting against Shide all alone as she and her shadows take their last breaths. Overwhelmed by the horrible outcome, Shin decides to kill himself so that he can return in time and put an end to all his friends' sufferings. He aims his gun barrel at his head, takes a deep breath, and shoots himself, only to loop back enough in time to prevent Mio and So from going to Alan's garden, as he and Mio's shadow inform them about the present situation. He then sends them back to the house to keep them safe, as he himself rushes to Torajima Island with Mio's shadow, only to find Tokiko fighting Shide with her baby shadows. They approach the battle even more determined to help, but are terrified to witness Nagumo, who has already been defeated by Shide, lying gravely injured at his feet. Nizu observes the situation and realizes that they have no chance against Haine and Shide, so he begs them all to retreat. But Shin refuses to abandon Nagumo as he screams in agony, causing his right eye to bleed. Just then, Shide throws a knife at Shin, but Mio's shadow saves him. They are about to fight when suddenly Haine gets a strange vision and stops Shide, leaving abruptly. With them gone, Shin rushes to Nagumo. He promises her that he will surely save her in the next loop as he tries to kill himself, but is stopped by Mio's shadow, who reminds him that he is already at his power's limit and may not be able to return. Shin is refusing to give up when Nagumo pulls him towards her and asks him to come back to his senses, telling him to fight until the end. She further claims that Haine is still a child at heart, just like she was 14 years ago, but it is actually Shide who is the real mastermind and is controlling her. Eventually, she asks him to free Haine and look after her dear brother as she transfers Ryanosuke's data to Shin's body, leaving his brother and their memories in his care as she breathes her last, leaving a broken Shin by her side. That was it for the recap, guys. Let us know in the comments if you like it. Also, subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you would like to see the rest of the summertime rendering. Thanks for watching Anime Reborn, and we'll see you guys in the next video.